A very good evening to all of the participants. I am Dr. Monali Vakharia and I work with the medical team of Sun Pharma. On behalf of the organization, I welcome you all the participants for this webinar today. In these challenging times, safety is the priority, and therefore we thought of discussing this webinar to ensure safety of yourself and your patients in this critical hour. And for this discussion, we have with us today three very renowned and distinguished experts in the field of ophthalmology, Dr. Sumit Chaudhary, Dr. Manish Singh, and Dr. Surojit Chakraborty, live from Kolkata. Welcome you all, sir.
Thank you, Monali.
And I will briefly introduce our speakers for the day. First, we start with Dr. Sumit Chaudhary. Dr. Sumit Chaudhary is a medical director of Eye Care and Research Center, Kolkata, and also a glaucoma consultant at Disha Eye Hospitals. He has done his MBBS from Kolkata National Medical College and Hospital in 1983 and MS in 1991. He has been organizing secretary of Glaucoma Society of India in 1995 in Kolkata, organizing president of GSI 2008 Kolkata, and he has been ex-president Kolkata Academy of Ophthalmology. He has performed various live surgeries at GSI Meet and various state conferences and at different workshops on glaucoma. And he has also chaired as chairman, convener, moderator at AIOS, GSI, SARC, and various other conferences. He has contributed 4 chapters in Glaucoma in Modern Ophthalmology book. I welcome you, sir. Dr. Sumit Chaudhary, sir.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Manish Singh. Dr. Manish Singh completed his MS in Ophthalmology from Regional Institute of Ophthalmology, Kolkata Medical College with University Gold Medal. He did his long-term fellowship in glaucoma at Sankara Nethralaya, Chennai. He is also a fellow of the International Council of Ophthalmology. He was a consultant in glaucoma and cataract services at Sankara Nethralaya from 2007 to 2012. Currently, he is working as a senior consultant in glaucoma and cataract services, BBI Foundation, Kolkata. He has been the East Zonal representative of Glaucoma Society of India from 2010 to 12 and East India Zonal in charge of Glaucoma India Education Program 2016 to 18. He is a scientific committee member and executive member of Ophthalmology Society of West Bengal. And he has published more than 14 articles in peer-reviewed national and international journals and 2 chapters in ophthalmology. Welcome, sir. Dr. Manish Singh, sir.
Thank you.
Our third speaker is Dr. Surojit Chakraborty. He is head glaucoma services at Priyamvada Birla Arvind Eye Hospital, Kolkata. Dr. Surojit Chakraborty has completed his MBBS in 1996 from RG Kar Medical College and further did his ophthalmology from IPG, ME and R in year 2002. And further, he joined Arvind Eye Hospital, Coimbatore as fellow in the same year and completed fellowship there. After that, he has joined Priyamvada Birla Arvind Eye Hospital, Kolkata as consultant in glaucoma services and is working there till date. He has more than 70 presentations in glaucoma at various state and national meet. He was East Zonal Glaucoma India Educational Program Coordinator and is also National Faculty in Glaucoma Society of India annual conferences in 2014. Welcome, sir, Dr. Surojit Chakraborty.
Yeah, good evening, Monali.
Okay, so I'll briefly tell the format of this webinar. It will be a 15-minute talk by each of our speakers, followed by question and answer session. Participants can post their questions in the chat box provided. So now, without taking much of the time, I would hand over the session to Dr. Sumit, sir now. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Monali. I'm Dr. Sumit Chaudhary speaking from Calcutta. First, I thank you, my dear friends and colleagues, and also the Avista Division of Sun Pharma providing me and others in this platform. So this is a opener, but a recent COVID time for the last about 3 weeks to 1 month. In this lockdown period, we are in the house, just stuck to the house. And we can see from the afternoon to the evening, all the webinars are being, it is good for the health because it's a learning effect and also there's no sleep during the daytime. So let's start. In the COVID-19, what does it say? Stay safe and keep a distance to avoid contamination. For ophthalmologists, to keeping a distance of 1 meter or 2 meters, we can't see the patient. So there needs something to support or guard ourselves and the patient to avoid the contamination. So who is at risk? From the very hospital security guard to the end of the ophthalmologist, sweeper and so on, everyone is at risk for the contamination. So let's start. So how to do it? So we must cease providing the eye surgeries first only for the emergency patient. No elective surgery should be done or elective patients should be seen. Only the emergency service should be provided. You should protect your health workers. It's a very important part. And reduce the transmission to other patients, between patients, and between health workers also.
If you are using the slides, please share the screen, Sumita.
No, I'm not using the slides now. I'm using it later on. So with the ophthalmology, Ajit, is it not comfortable no, with the
Yes, sir.
slides?
It's fine. Fine.
So spikes are there. We ophthalmology see only the emergency patient. The doors are open to them only. How the patient comes? First, the patient comes, and who stops them? The security guard. So the security guard should have total protection to avoid the contamination of the COVID-19. So what does he do? First the patient comes, he does the thermal test of the patient to see the temperature if there is not a there. Then he asks the patient to wash their hands with the soap and water which is readily available at the doorsteps and give them a sanitizer lotion to wash the clean the hands. The patient must wear the mask. Only one party is allowed to enter the hospital premises, and the security guard should be properly equipped and properly taken care as for the mask, gloves, and everything. If it is possible to the PPE kit, but not always possible. Then the patient comes to the front desk for the name, etc., etc. What the first risk is, they not be using the PPT card, but they should hand over a questionnaire to the patient. That is the ideal. Have you ever traveled outside? Have you come from outside? Is there any fever or not? Or if there is sore throat or there or not? They should first. And the patient is, in some of the hospitals, the patient is allowed to sign it and keep it in the hospital. Then after that, patient comes to us. Now who takes the care of the patient? The health workers. And ours is the optometrist and the counselors. So they should be protected for themselves and also for the patients. The vision testing, it is not mandatory, but if it is possible, do a test and write it down. And take a small history of the emergency cause, why you have come here. If it is most of the patient, what we are saying at this present moments are the red eye, conjunctivitis, and some of emergency cases of injuries, history of retinal detachment, corneal ulcer, some acute cases of glaucoma also are being seen. These are taken as an emergency. These patients are to be taken care of. The health workers or the counselors or the optometrists, what they do, they take the history of the patient, vision testing, with great care not to touch the patient or as less touch as possible. Then the patients are sent to the ophthalmologist. Now here comes the ophthalmic part, the sitting arrangement. The waiting room should be airy. Try to avoid the air condition, open the windows and fans should be there. And the sitting arrangement, they should be sitting at the same distance. At least if there is a 3 chairs, the middle chair should be empty. There should be maintain a gap, a distance. When the patient comes to the doctor, we normally say, just if the patient is ambulatory, if we can say why he has come for, Let the patient enters the consultation room, not the party. Let the party wait outside to avoid the rush or the crumbling of more people in one room. This can help the ophthalmologist, the health workers, the patient and patient party to avoid some contamination. The patient is allowed to sit on the slit lamp in front of the slit lamp. The doctor asks the questions. In the meantime, there should be a gap. The patient is allowed, it said, do not open the mask. Some of the patient, while they were complaining of their symptom, they just opened the mask and said, it has to be avoided. Number one, from the patient part of view. Then after that, the doctor's part, ophthalmologist's part. The ophthalmologist takes lots of care to avoid all these complications. First, if a PPE kit is available, is it good? If not, there are some of the processes we are taking care of with the doctors. Number one, cap. Number two, the mask. If it's N95, it's okay. If it is not N95, 3-ply mask, 2 numbers is quite good for them. They should wear a washable gown. That's what it is, a water-resistant gown, which may not be a PPE kit, but it should be a washable one, water-resistant. So the gloves, ideally they should wear the gloves, is the nitrate gloves, which can be washed and cleaned, and with one pair of gloves, you can see about 10 to 15 patients in few hours period. If it is not there, nitrate gloves, he can wear 2 pairs of gloves, which is much safety for him and also to the patient. And for the leg gear, etc., he can do it, no problem. When the patient sits in front of put his chin on the micro slit lamp, the slit lamp should have a breath guards. The breath guards mean every slit lamp has a small breath guard, but that small is not enough. It should be a larger one, which should be made of the acetate sheets or the clear plastic sheets or the perspex. What I will show you later in one slit lamp, what is it? What is the breath guard? Then he sees the patient. The timing should be as less as possible because it should not be more timing, because we don't want to keep the patient in a longer period in the consultation room. So make it fast. The main problem comes for the glaucoma patients is that how do I do the tonometry? There are lots of controversies are there. The Perkins tonometer should not be used. You can use the Goldband slit lamp mounted tonometer, which can be cleaned with a 1% sodium hypochlorite solution or with the isopropyl swab, or you can go for non-contact tonometer. Yes, it is said that there is an aerosol dispersal for the non-contact tonometer. So the person who is taking the non-contact tonometer, he should have a wider shield or cover to avoid the aerosol to come to him or her. Then after the application, then the questions come, will you do the gonioscopy? It is not mandatory. If required, you should do a gonioscopy. But after every gonioscopy, the lens should be cleaned with the soap and water and also with the 70% isopropyl alcohol swab. And then the fundus examination. It should be done with the 90 diopter or the 78 diopter, but not with the direct gonioscopy. You can use the indirect ophthalmoscope because the retina surgeons use the indirect ophthalmoscope because they are keeping a long distance. Then after that, the prescription is being given to the patient and the patient is disposed as early as possible from the room. Or the patient is disposed, the party is given the prescription. After the patient moves out, next comes the cleaning of the slit lamp and also the chairs and also the doctor's chair, if it is possible, with the sodium hypochlorite solution 1% or 0.5%, it can be made very easily. Just in 1 liter of water, you can give 1 tablespoonful of bleaching or 1.5 tablespoonful of bleaching. That is coming to 0.5% or 1% assumption. Then the doctors clean the gloves with the soap and water and with the sterilium if it is possible, or with the hand sanitizer with the alcohol. These are the precautions to be taken by the hospital and the doctors to avoid the contamination. The main part, what I want to see, is what you are doing is for yourself, no doubt, for the patient, and also the health workers of the hospital to avoid the COVID to come to us. So these are the process taken by the hospitals. But for the small practitioner, you should try this time. It will help you a lot because you have lots of time. Just after that, I want to show some slit lamp findings. Which one? It- This is a flow chart of one of the patient in the patient that is the ophthalmologist. The screen for the fever, then yes, if it's ocular emergency or not. This is a flow chart I found in one of my chapters. It is quite good. You can see it. This is the state lamp what I have said is the guard, the brake. Look, this is the guard which is fitted in front of the state lamp with the eye holes. But this question always comes to my mind, which webinar today? Because daily we have find from 12:30 or somewhere that there's a lots of webinar and all those things. Thank you very much. If you want any questions, I will talk to you later.
Thank you, sir, for such an informative session. I'm sure it will be helpful to all our ophthalmologists faculty. Now I will hand over the session to Dr. Manish, sir. He will be speaking on challenging cases in glaucoma, part 1.
Good evening, everyone. I hope I am audible to everyone.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So basically, thanks to Sumit sir for nicely elaborating the key points, and also he gave a very important thing that there are too many webinars, and I saw this picture I think today or day before yesterday. It's a very interesting thing because there have been a lot of discussions about whether we should have so many webinars or not. Personally, I was also not very keen because I thought we all are so stressed and so depressed, insecure, whether this is the right time for academic discussion or not. But whole day we are spending time on Facebook, social media, watching series. And so in a way it's good, at least for an hour or two, you get a chance to meet Sumit sir. I'm getting a chance to meet Dr. Surajit and Dr. Monali also. So sort of socializing in a virtual world, and it's a positive time. At least an hour we are doing some positive discussion. So in a way, I feel there's no harm having a few webinars in a day. At least it breaks the monotony of the day. I'll share one case. I have two cases. I don't know whether the time will permit for two cases or not, because Dr. Monali is already ready with a lot of questions to be discussed at the end of the session. First case which I like to share is Mr. Wadhwa, who came to us way back in 2012 as a known case of primary open-angle glaucoma. It is a very common case with any one of us can be seeing in our OPDs. He was a hypertensive patient and the left eye was already lost due to fungal endophthalmitis, which he had, I think, 6 months to a year back somewhere else. So he just came for opinion for the right eye. And when he saw the right eye definitely had a significant amount of cataract with the vision of 6, 18 and 8. So it was associated with the visual a decrease in vision also. The left eye was thicycle, so we'll be focusing totally on the right eye. When we went to the old records, we find that the baseline pressure before the medicine was started was around 25 millimeter mercury. But to us, the patient had a pressure of 12 millimeter, which patient was already on timolol and brimonidine combination. Gonoscopy had open angles, pachymetry was slightly on the higher side, and there was a mild inferior thinning. We did a visual field test. You can see very clearly the visual field superior defect can be seen. So sort of everything was matching very well. One-eyed patient with a significant cataract, pressure well controlled on a combination medication, but not a very advanced field loss, and patient was keen on visual improvement. So we thought just going for a routine cataract surgery will be more than enough, because you don't want to unnecessarily subject the patient for a trabeculectomy when the pressures are controlled, the fields are not that advanced. And anyway, just 2 medicines, he's be able to maintain a pressure well within normal limit. We went ahead with cataract surgery, and thankfully the cataract surgery was uncomplicated. Patient got a 6/6 and 6 vision, and the pressure remained controlled after surgery also on a combination of timolol with brimonidine. We were happy, the patient was happy. Patient was not from Calcutta, he went back to his hometown, and then the patient didn't come back for checkup. He had a local checkup done where the pressures were checked and the pressures were normal. When he came back to us again in June, that time he complained of a decrease of vision in the right eye. Clinically on slit limb examination, the eye was quiet, no congestion, well-placed lens. Vision was also 6/9 and 6, which was fairly okay. Pressures were normal. Locally, someone had stopped the combination drug and shifted him to a prostaglandin, which is also fair enough, no harm done. And clinically also, you can see the disc. You can see there is some inferior thinning, and it's a normal size disc, not much of cupping. So we were very much happy to see the patient, nothing to be worried about the patient, but the patient was insistent that he's not able to see. So we thought maybe he's one of those patients who, even with a 6/6, 6/9 vision, are always complaining that maybe because of some negative photopsia or some glare. But we still thought, okay, let us go with the perimetry, and in case the perimetry is also normal or rather inconclusive, we may even consider going for OCT macular evaluation, because sometimes these patients do have a subclinical cystoid macular edema, which you may miss on the routine clinical evaluation. When we did a perimetry, there was a significant progression, and we were surprised. And this patient has been doing perimetry previously also, fairly intelligent patient. This amount of progression was something which we didn't expect. And not only there was a progression, this field progression was encroaching towards the fovea and the fixation also. So the patient was right. Definitely there was some increase in visual field defect, which might be causing a blurring of the vision for the patient, because anyway he's a one-eyed patient. So the other eye is not supporting him in his daily visual need. So this is a patient who was progressing on a normal intraocular pressure. So before we go into what was the possible diagnosis, we just quickly have a discussion that what is the possible thing we should think whenever the patient is progressing when the pressures are normal. The first thing we should think whether we are missing any IOP spike or not. Pachymetry, we already know it's normal. We can repeat the pachymetry also to make sure there's any change or not. But generally, a post-surgery, you have a hardly very minimal changes of pachymetry. We did a diurnal IOP. The office diurnal was normal. We went ahead with a more detailed evaluation. We thought maybe look into the cardiac status. Also, we can do a carotid Doppler to make sure there is no blockage of the carotid, which might be causing this atypical progression in this patient. Also, we should be doing a blood lipid profile, a blood pressure of 24-hour monitoring if possible. At least do a monitoring over the daytime, and also check blood sugar. You should also look for sleep apnea. You can refer the patient to a pulmonologist and try to get a checkup done whether the patient is having any sleep apnea or not. Patient was borderline diabetic, so we took an opinion of a diabetologist. The carotid Doppler report showed that there was a plaque in artery, but there was no flow disturbance, and this plaque cannot be the reason for such an atypical progression. but the patient was worsening. And if you see the field, there is something interesting about the field. There is a progression, but the progression is not limited to the arcuate area. Something which we don't normally see in a glaucoma patient. In a glaucoma patient, when you have progression, generally the progression is more limited within the arcuate area. This progression more toward the center and sort of following the quadrant looks to be more like a neurological problem. So we thought we should be doing a neuroimaging also. And in this patient, we did a neuroimaging, and in MRI, we found that there was a suprasellar mass. Basically, it was a granuloma, which was suppressing the optic nerve and the optic chiasma, resulting in this type of atypical progression. The patient was referred for a neurologist opinion because the treatment of this granuloma had to be done by a neurologist. The CSF analysis showed that it can be a tubercular granuloma or a fungal granuloma. The PCR was negative, and the diagnosis which was made by the neurologist was of a fungal etiology. As I was telling you initially that 6 months back, patient had a fungal endophthalmitis. Patient lost one of his eyes. So maybe this granuloma might be related to that fungal infection which we had in the eye. The point I like to highlight here is that every glaucoma OPD or in a general OPD also, we often get patients who are established case of glaucoma, and there is a sudden change in the visual field. So whenever there is a progression in the visual field, we should try to clinically correlate with the disc finding. If it is not matching with the disc finding, like in this case, it was not matching. And if there is too much of pallor, if the findings are not corroborating properly, we should be thinking beyond intraocular pressure. Look into other factors like whether there is a problem in the carotid, whether there is a neurological problem. Also look for cases of nocturnal hypotension, patient with any cardiac disease, which might be causing an ischemia of the optic nerve, resulting in atypical progression. So I'll just share one more case. Dr. Munari, do we have time?
Yeah, sure, sir. You can go for 4 to 5 minutes. It's okay.
Okay, thank you. So we'll be sharing one more patient. This is a 64-year-old lady who again presented to us with a loss of vision in her right eye, and the vision had dropped down from 6/9 to PL only. You can see the eye, extremely congested eye, and you can see there's a corneal edema, and you can see the lens here. Patient had redness and pain. Patient was a known case of hypertension, diabetic, and patient had a phacotrabeculectomy done 6 months back in her right eye somewhere else. She came to our emergency with this finding. So since she had a phacotrabeculectomy done and the patient had a sudden decrease of vision, so we were started to think whether the patient has developed any complication or late complications of trabeculectomy or not. And as per the record, we found that just 2 months back, patient was recorded as a vision of 6/9 and 6 in both the eyes. Left eye also had a PI done 2 years back. Right eye also had a PI done 2 years back. So basically, we were dealing with a case of angle closure glaucoma. Left eye had a PI done and things were normal in the left eye. Right eye, which had a phacotrabeculectomy done 6 months back, had a normal vision 2 months back, suddenly comes with a PL only vision. And you can see the eye, the blebs are flat, there is corneal edema, you can see the lens. Anterior chamber was extremely shallow and the pressure was 48 millimeter mercury. So now you have a patient with a shallow chamber, grade 3 cells, inflamed eye, and closed angle in the right eye. The left eye had open angle because he had a PI done. So maybe that was the reason why the angles had opened up. We also did a fundus evaluation. Right eye, we were not able to do fundus, see the fundus properly because of presence of vitreous hemorrhage. And there was a red fundal glow. You can see here, there is a reddish glow can be appreciated. Left eye, the disc was normal and the fundus was also normal. So what is the most probable diagnosis? So whenever we see a case like this, who had a phacotrap done, comes with a shallow chamber and high pressure, the common causes which come to our mind, one, it can be a delayed suprachoroidal hemorrhage, also because the patient is having axial shallowing of the chamber with vitreous hemorrhage. So suprachoroidal hemorrhage is a very possible diagnosis. Pupil block glaucoma is another possibility, but this eye patient had a patent PI which was done during trap. So unlikely it's a pupillary glaucoma. Aqueous misdirection can be another possibility because patient is having high pressure with axial shallowing of anterior chamber. But such an inflamed eye in aqueous misdirection is extremely unlikely. Also, aqueous misdirection patient will not have vitreous hemorrhage, which is again very, very unusual finding. But we thought we went more into detailed evaluation, and I'm telling you, a lot of time we have seen in a ophthalmic OPD, the history is, especially the systemic history, is not taken in detail. In this case, when we took a detailed systemic history, patient informed us that patient is having a breast lump with a nipple discharge for last 3 months. And in fact, most of her family members, except her daughter, was not even aware of this. And she was taking some homeopathy medication for that. We did ultrasound also, we found there was a mass lesion in the vitreous. So basically, we were not dealing with a suprachoroidal hemorrhage. We were dealing with some mass lesion in the vitreous cavity along with a mass in her breast. We took an opinion of an oncologist. Patient had a CT scan done and patient was found to have a calcified mass in her breast. Patient also underwent whole body scintigraphy which showed metastasis in other parts of the body and bone also. So basically patient had a metastasis from her breast ductal carcinoma which resulted in a mass in the choroid and the vitreous, and this was the reason why there was an increased pressure in the posterior part of the eye, pushing the lens and the iris diaphragm anteriorly, causing shallowing of the anterior chamber, causing secondary rise of intraocular pressure and severe inflammation. So this was a case of ocular metastasis from a breast carcinoma with a resultant vitreous hemorrhage, shallow chamber, and a secondary rise of intraocular pressure. In this case, definitely we use anti-glaucoma medication to control the pressure. We also use steroids and atropine to control the pain and inflammation. The rest of the treatment was done by the oncologist. We also take an opinion of oculoplastic surgeon and radiotherapy was given to the patient. So basically, I like to highlight here is that sometime when we have a patient who has a trap done recently and patient comes with a shallow chamber or raised pressure, we generally try to relate with the most probable diagnosis of a failed trab or a complication of trabeculectomy. But we should be looking into other aspects also. You can really have something like a metastasis also as a differential diagnosis. Also very important, even in an ophthalmic OPD, we should be taking a detailed systemic history because a lot of time certain important information can be received from the systemic history. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for sharing such interesting cases. I would now request Dr. Surojit to continue with this challenging cases in glaucoma. Over to you, sir. Dr. Surojit, sir.
I think there is storm going outside and suddenly the video is gone. I can only hear you, I cannot see anything.
Sir, we are seeing you, sir, in the screen.
Sir, we can see you and we can hear you also.
But I am not being able to see my slides.
Okay. So what we can do is, sir, we can take few questions in the meanwhile and then we can see if your video is coming. Is it okay, sir?
Yeah, no problem. I think you can continue. Let me just log out and log in once more.
Okay, fine. Then we can take some questions.
Question answer session. I will join you back.
Yeah. Okay, sir.
Okay, right.
Madam, technical support लीजिए ना.
There is a very severe storm that might be causing some connectivity issues.
Okay.
Dr. Monali, we can have few questions.
Okay.
Sir, can you do it Windows P button, Windows and P. Your video is extended to the second display, I think so.
Dr. Monali.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, first question we have is, what are the precautions to be taken during this time for emergency trabeculectomy? I think Dr. Sumit can answer this. What are the precautions to be taken during this time for emergency trabeculectomy? Sumit sir, you have to unmute your screen.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Fine.
Number one is that Emergency trabeculectomy is only in cases very rare. We can wait if the patient is on tablets. We can wait. That should be the idea. If it is not possible, if they want an patient or something or other, we have to go for the operation. For the operation, the local anesthesia should be used. Do not use any general anesthesia. And do the trabeculotomy as the same with other emergency operation as being done in the OT. But lots of precautions should be taken as well for PPE kits and other things. And the instruments what we are using it has to be double sterilized or double ATO for the safeguard for the later patient. And if you can use any disposable thing, it's better.
Thank you, sir. Next question we have for Dr. Manish. What are the precautions to be taken to avoid post-surgical choroidal effusion following trabeculectomy with and without valve surgery? Should I repeat, sir?
Please repeat. Following trabeculectomy.
Trab with and without valve surgery.
Trabeculectomy with or without valve surgery, this part is not clear. But in general, what are the precautions we should be taking to avoid choroidal? We have to understand whenever you are doing a trabeculectomy surgery or even a glaucoma shunt surgery also, sudden shallowing on the anterior chamber, sudden fluctuation of the intraocular pressure is the most important reason why you have this type of complications like choroidals or even suprachoroidal hemorrhage. So we have to control the pressure preoperatively. In case the pressures are very high, you are planning for a surgery, give a oral Diamox, oral acetazolamide to bring down the pressure. Obviously, you have to make sure the patient is not having any sulfur allergy or any renal problems. Just before surgery, within an hour, you use IV mannitol as per the body weight and bring down the intraocular pressure. So don't operate in eye which is having very high pressures. Then you have on-table shallowing of anterior chamber and you have more chances of suprachoroidal and choroidal both. Post-operatively, in initial first 1 to 2 weeks, avoid releasing sutures, avoid hypotony. Sometimes if the pressure is around 20, 25 also, you can leave it. Don't be very aggressive with your massage. Don't release the suture very early, because when you're releasing suture or when you're giving massage aggressively, you're causing shallowing of anterior chamber. These cases, patient may develop choroidals. Also, elderly patients with systemic problems like hypertension, diabetes, atherosclerosis, these patients tend to have higher chances of choroidals. So in these patients also avoid to be very aggressive with controlling of intraocular pressure. Try to keep the pressure around 20, and after a 1 to 2 week, gradually you try to bring down the pressure. So these are the precautions we should take. Another thing we have seen, sometimes we teach the patient how to do the massage. These cases, some patients are very aggressive, and with the forceful massage, they end up in choroidals. So in case you're teaching massage to a patient, make sure the patient has that level of intelligence that he can do the massage properly. Nowadays, what I do, I tell the patient to do the massage in front of me in the OPD 2-3 times to make sure he's able to do it properly, and then tell the patient to do it at home. Post-operative case is always better to have the pressure slightly on the higher side rather than on the hypotony side, because hypotony patients tend to have more complications than patients with slightly higher pressures.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Surojit, sir, you are back, sir. Can we?
I don't think so, because whenever I am loading the Zoom apps, it is.
Can he send us the slides? We'll share it from here.
Yeah, yeah. Can you share the slides from there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can you see my slides from there?
Just a minute, sir. Just a minute. We are checking with our technical team. Meanwhile, we can have one question for Dr. Sumit. Are all viral conjunctivitis patients should be tested for COVID-19 or not?
Still, this is a fallacy and the controversy is there. The conjunctivitis is one of the first cause of COVID-19 or not. Because in this year, for the last 1 month or something, a little more, we have been seeing a lots of conjunctivitis patients, which seems to be of viral origin because there is no much stickiness or heavy discharge. And the patients
Doctor sir, try to log in again once more.
are
Actually, the
the
screen is
recovery
blank
stage is
totally.
quite a lump.
For me, the screen is blank.
And the recovery stages is a little more because it takes about 15 days or that. But normally in case of conjunctivitis, we give the antibacterial drugs and lubricating drugs. In some of my cases, I tried the antiviral also. But the problem comes is the dryness against it. So I'm not sure. I haven't tested that these are the cases of COVID. Doctor. Some doctors have assumption, yes, these are the early signs of COVID, but it has to be taken.
Okay. Okay.
One point I like to add, Dr. Monali, with
Yes, sir,
what
sure.
Sir has said. Whenever you have a patient with conjunctivitis at the current scenario, treat all the patient of conjunctivitis as a COVID patient, because it's very difficult to understand who is having COVID and who is not having COVID. So you make sure you take all the precaution whenever you come across with any patient. And if the patient having conjunctivitis, be more careful, because conjunctivitis, especially follicular conjunctivitis, has been one of the presenting signs in a patient with COVID. To do testing or not testing, the problem is probably in India at this moment we don't have so many kits that we can do test at will. We can test every patient we want. Later on, once you have more kits, maybe a scenario may come that based on your assumption you can decide which patient to test, which patient to not to test. But at this moment probably it's not possible. But I know few of my friends in US who have started that every patient whom they are taking to OT, they are trying to get a COVID test done before they are operating. Again, in India, we don't have that many kit available at the current moment that we can do a testing for all patients like that.
Thank you so much, sir. Next question is, in IOP checkup by NCT, is there no risk for the next patient? And if there is any risk, then what is the way to minimize that risk?
Can I answer?
Yeah, yes,
Yes,
sir,
sir.
sure, sir.
Yeah. There is a says that COVID, through COVID, if there is a COVID, by the tears, it can spread to others. Say. But the controversy is still there. Yes or no? Plus, it is plus because there is an aerosol dispersal over the when you go for the NCT. So that if you want to go for the NCT, do the NCT, but take care of the guard. There should be a large plastic guard
Actually,
for
I
the
restarted and
technician,
again it
for
went
the
blank.
technician to get the aerosol to be dispersed, and also the patient's care also. And after taking the NCT, clean the tips with the sodium hypochlorite 0.5% or 1%, let it dry, wait some minutes, then go for the next patient. I recommend, or my wish is that in my clinics I do, at least I give a 10 minutes gap. But I'm not sure I'm dispersing or I'm contaminating the next patient. I'm not sure here. But in some of the bigger institute, they are regularly using the non-contact tonometer in case of Goldman tonometer for the glaucoma patients. And they are taking care like this.
Thank you, sir. Next question is for Dr. Manish. What is the role of pilocarpine in lens-induced glaucoma?
Better to be avoided in patients with lens-induced glaucoma, because in lens-induced glaucoma, you generally have shallow chambers with a lens which is with increased lens thickness. So the problem with pilocarpine, when you are using pilocarpine, it tends to cause shallowing of anterior chamber. So it can further aggravate this lens-induced glaucoma. So in a case you have a phacomorphic glaucoma or even a phacolytic glaucoma, because phacolytic glaucoma has associated inflammation, which can again be aggravated by pilocarpine. So pilocarpine is not a good drug to be used in lens-induced glaucoma. Rather, lens removal will be a better option. A PI can be done because a lot of these patients have associated pupillary block also. So doing a PI, trying to control medically as much as possible, should be a good option. Pilocarpine better be avoided.
Okay.
Pseudophakic glaucoma, you can use it, not phakic glaucoma. Surajit da.
Dr. Surajit, can you hear me, Dr. Surajit?
I think he is logging on again.
He can just mail the presentation to one of us and we can load it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Raghu, can you hear us?
Yeah, sure. So can you kindly mail the presentation to us? I will text. Can I give? I will text my email address to Jasprit ji.
Okay, okay.
You know, so if you can email
Yeah,
the
yeah.
presentation, then we will share it from here.
Okay, fine. Okay. Dr. Surajit sir, if you can email your presentation.
So I'll just just on this side. I'll just like to interrupt. I had a call discussion with Dr. Surajit's computer system has gone blank because of some lightning that has happened at his place. So once the system gets rebooted, he will be able to share the screen. Till the time, I suggest we can have some more question and answers. So there has been a voltage issue at his place. Okay. So thanks a lot. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So next question is how we can avoid BKC related side effects in topical glaucoma medications. So if you allow me, sir, I would like to take this question with your due permission.
Sure. Always.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So answering this question, I would like to make a point over here that recently Sun Pharma's Advanced Research Center have come up with a unique formulation of bimatoprost 0.01%, which has been made BKC free using two innovative technologies, that is tight junction modulation technology and the other is gel free reservoir technology. So with the help of the first technology, that is tight junction modulation technology, what they have tried to do is they have tried to increase the membrane fluidity transiently by making some transient pores, and this will increase the drug penetrability through the cornea. And through the second technology, that is gel free reservoir technology, what they have tried to do is they have made a polymer complex. They mix the two polymers and form a interpenetrating gel-like network, which forms a mucoadhesive film and which will increase the retention or residence time of the drug molecules on the surface of the cornea and improve the bioavailability. And this has been also tested by Spark in animal studies, and they have found that the IOP reduction efficacy and the aqueous humor concentration reached is comparable with the commercially available BKC preserved formulations. So this is one of the options, I guess, to avoid BKC related side effects.
Is it like that? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Is it that the laptop cross RT or the Latacom CF type?
Yeah, so like they have used the technology. There is one innovative TJM, that is tight junction modulation technology, which has been used. So it will transiently modulate the tight junctions in the cornea and it will help penetration of the drug. So it will, we can say it will compensate for the BKC free role. BKC was required for the drug penetration. With the help of this technology, it improves the drug penetration without the need for BKC. And it is preserved with PHMB as a preservative, that is polyhexamethylene biguanide. It's a well-tolerated preservative with lot toxicity.
Nice.
Is it like that as the concentration is low, the reaction should be less also?
Yeah. So it has the advantage of lesser hyperemia because the 0.03% the concern was hyperemia. So with reducing the drug concentration, chances of hyperemia are reduced, plus the efficacy is maintained, like the 0.03% concentration.
There should be any storage.
There are no specific storage required. It can be stored below 25 degrees Celsius at room temperature.
That's a room temperature.
Yeah.
The trial is going on, I hope.
Yeah. So The human trials are going on, and I think the result will be very shortly out within a span of, I guess, 1 to 2 months. We have already
And
conducted
the
the
cost
animal
will,
studies. Yeah.
and the cost will be less, I hope.
Co-
The cost.
Cost, I have to check, sir. I'm not sure about the cost currently.
Dr. Monali, I just had a talk with one of the people. Actually, Dr. Surajit is trying to reboot his system.
Okay.
So, with permission of Dr. Sumit Chaudhary, I have another case ready. So, is it okay if I share? Because we have to wait for Dr. Surajit. If we have question, we can take question, or we can share one more case, whatever you want.
Dr. Sumit, sir?
Raghu, what is that? What Raghu says? How many questions are there now?
So we have still 3 to 4 more questions.
Then we can take questions. No issues. We take questions.
Okay.
Then we can.
So next question is for Dr. Sumit, sir. How difficult is to operate with full protection equipments through microscope, and why double ETO? Because this virus is heat labile. Should we use single?
The glass should be
Should use single ETO?
Two pairs. Ideally, should be single ETO is okay because at this virus can issue. Number one. Number two is it is a lipid cover, and with the heat it will break, and also the DNA also. The problem comes with all this like that walking in space, the space suits and doing the OT. It's a little tougher. We are little slow. We are very clumsy. The movement restriction is there, but we can handle it. I think so. Because the doctors who are doing this is of emergency operation, initially there's a hiccups, but there we are in a position to do it.
Okay. Okay, sir. Next question we have for Dr. Manish, sir. How will we proceed to manage emergency patients with lacerated wounds of lid, sclera, or cornea following RTA?
In this period,
sorry, sir?
In the COVID period or without the COVID period?
Nothing is mentioned, sir. We can answer both the scenarios.
Okay.
I think the management of corneal tears will be same what we have been doing previously also. There's nothing new, but only as Dr. Sumit sir has already mentioned, the precaution we have to take. In the current scenario, since the number of cases has increased and there is a huge number of asymptomatic patients who are still not diagnosed, so every patient who comes to the OPD should be considered as a COVID positive case, and every possible precautions, as we already mentioned in the first presentation, starting from the security person to the reception, to the counselor, to the optometrist, to the surgeon, everything has to be taken. And if it's a corneal rupture, it's a small rupture, you can consider doing a topical anesthesia also. If you can't do a topical anesthesia, you need a general anesthesia, then what we have to be done that when the patient is undergoing anesthesia, that time there is always a risk of aerosols. So the anesthetist should be taking all the possible precaution, including the PPE kit. At the time of intubation, anesthetist should be there only with maximum one assistant. The surgeon should go out. When the patient is under anesthesia, then the surgeon should come in, complete the surgery in the minimum time possible, taking all the precaution. Everyone in the OT should be wearing a PPE kit. And regarding sterilization also, we have already mentioned what process to be taken. And after every case, you should clean the OT. If possible, open the door, just try to slightly ventilate. Take a break between the surgeries. Don't go ahead with back-to-back surgery. Take some break, let the OT be cleaned again, and then go ahead with the second surgery. The rest of the repair of corneal ulcer and laceration will be similar to what we have been doing over here. Surgically, there won't be any change. The change will be more in the precautions what we are taking.
There is one more question. It is actually a similar question. Any need of sanitization of shoes and dresses after the end of OPD or chamber?
Yes, it has to be done. After the patient leaves the consultation room, the room should be clean with the sodium hypochlorite solution. All the instruments, chairs and tables, but there not to be because of gases or something, no need, but it should be wiped down, or if can be there is spray type, you can spray it. But the room should be cleaned, or the room should be sanitized at least, but not like that in the bigger way.
Okay. Okay, sir. There is one interesting next by one of the participants have posted one interesting question. I have seen at least 6 to 7 patients of viral conjunctivitis, ruled out any travel history, and subsequently all patients are okay by now. Didn't use slit lamp. These patients did not have any constitutional symptoms also. What should I do now? Should I myself go for any COVID-19 test?
I don't think so. If the patient is not known to be a case of COVID positive and you don't have any symptoms, I don't think unnecessarily you should be undergoing this test.
So
I'm very sure you must have taken precautions while you're examining these patients. So I think you can go ahead with a normal
Yes,
procedure.
that's
what you
right.
do.
Yes, Surajit, you have come.
yeah, I think okay.
Fine,
Okay.
let's start.
Welcome, sir. Yes, you can start. So we have Dr. Surajit Chakraborty, who will be continuing with the challenging cases in glaucoma. Over to you, sir.
Just a second.
Yeah.
Well, good evening and sorry about all the trouble. There is a serious storm going on, so there is certain lightning and the connection went off and took some time to come back. Anyway, I'm here. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Good evening
I'll
again. And this is a challenging case. The name itself suggests that for any glaucoma specialist or for any ophthalmologist, the neovascular glaucoma is one of the most dreaded entities. The name itself gives a feeling, oh my God, it is gone. The eye is gone, probably we cannot do anything. So this is a story of a gentleman who came to us. He was 65 years old and came to us on last year, 14 June. And he had complained of dimness of vision since the last 15 days. And he was using some lubricant eye drop. He was diagnosed as ocular hypertensive elsewhere. But he left all the glaucoma medications or all the ocular hypertension medications for the past 2 months and just came for a checkup because he was seeing less. The systemic history elicited that he had a history of diabetes mellitus since last 20 years. He was on insulin and oral hypoglycemics. He underwent cardiac bypass surgery in 2015. And the slit lamp examination showed vision base corrected visual acuity was 618 part in right eye and 618 in left eye. Interestingly, both eyes had microcystic epithelial edema in the cornea, and in the right eye, the pupil had a relative afferent pupillary defect. I think these two things are sufficient for us to understand that quite some damage is done in the right eye, and most probably the pressure is high in both eyes. And as per our apprehension, rather, we saw that the right eye pressure is 50 millimeter mercury and left eye was 30 millimeter mercury. Gonioscopy, though it was quite hazy because the microcystic edema, it was quite hazy. And it is very difficult to do a gonio in that. Fundus, the disc appeared to be 0.6. I was not very sure. Particularly the left eye vision was very blurred. The left eye vision view was very blurred. And when the pressure was very high, we automatically started. We definitely invited the patient to get admitted and get a dose of mannitol to bring the pressure immediately, so that we can also visualize what is there inside behind the corneal edema. And the patient was not ready to get admitted on that day. and we advised all the medications we have because patient was cardiac. Though we didn't know about whether that was a conductive block or not, but still patient was cardiac, so we avoided timolol. And yes, AC was deep, so pilocarpine we also didn't think of. We added a prostaglandin and brimonidine brinzolamide combination and acetozolamide. After 5 days, he came back. He was symptomatically better. Right eye visual acuity bettered one line, but to our horror, we discovered that there is a lot of not a very significant amount, but quite some NVI was there in the right eye, and a dot NVI was there in the left eye. I don't know whether you can make out here. There is a very fine neovascularization along the pupillary border. If you can see here, at least you can appreciate the pupil is not a totally round one. It is dragged at one point where the neovascularization was there. And in the next one, you can find there are fine neovessels on the mid periphery of the iris surface also. Can you see that? Is it visible over there? Is it visible?
Yes, visible.
Yes,
It's
sir.
visible. Yes.
Okay, right. Thank you. And the gonioscopy showed that already the right eye has developed NVAs, neovascularization in the angles, which you can see here. Probably you can understand or make out here with small points where the pass was imminent, and there was no NVA in the left eye. So first of all, we stopped the prostaglandin. We continued with the other medications, and we definitely referred this patient to our retina colleagues. They detected a high risk PDR in both eyes, and immediately the as usual course was taken up. Urgent PRP was planned, FFA was advised, and steroid and atropine was advised. Patient underwent PRP in both eyes and 2 sittings. And after that, after 4 weeks post PRP, we found that the residual NVI was there still in the right eye. The left eye NVI has regressed. The pressure in the right eye again went up to 32 millimeter of mercury. Definitely, we reduced one medication. So what can we advise? We stopped the bimetoprost again because patient was still continuing with bimetoprost. And brimonidine brinzolamide was continued thrice daily. Tablet acetozolamide was again advised for 3 days. Patient was long-term diabetic. We don't know about the kidney status, so we were scared to put him on long-term acetozolamide also. Retina findings shows PRP laser marks and dry fibrous proliferations. And left eye, some dispersed vitreous hemorrhage was seen, and patient was advised for anti-VEGFs, which the patient underwent on 24th and 26th July. And on the follow-up visit, 5 days post-injection, we found that the NVI regressed in both the eyes. IAP also came out to be somewhat normal level, just at the borderline. So we were slightly relieved, but that relief was not for long. 2 weeks post-injection, again the patient came back with 44 millimeter mercury in the right eye. Fortunately, the left eye was 18 millimeter mercury. It was maintaining, and retina was status quo. And so, what was our next plan? Prostaglandin analog we cannot use because patient has NVI. We cannot use pilocarpine even, and we cannot use timolol. So all our anti-glaucoma medicines are limited by the patient's systemic and local illness. So we just continued with the medication, and we divided the dose of acetazolamide, half tablet 4 times a day, and reviewed after 5 days. Somehow it was less from 44 to it came to 38, but definitely not to a normal level. We knew that we have to intervene maybe. And with the advent of fresh vitreous hemorrhage again in the right eye, we knew that we have to go to some direction. We have to decide on what to do. For the posterior segment pathology, again, intravitreal injection ranibizumab can be planned. But what for the right eye surgery? Can it be trabeculectomy? Can it be primary GDD? Or can it be diode CBC? Let us come to the choices one by one. When we talk about diode CBC, most often we keep it as a reserve treatment. We keep it for non-seeing eyes because there is a high risk of phthisis and increased inflammation. But definitely for some seeing eyes, it works wonders. But still, with the higher risk in mind, we keep it as a later option. Trabeculectomy is a usual and safer option. Particularly, this patient had intact conjunctiva. Conjunctiva was not scarred. So we went to see the literatures, and literatures, most of them supported that yes, trap can be done. It is not a bad option. Trap with intraoperative MFC is a good treatment modality in the management of eyes, with NVG, so many literatures supporting. But they also recommended that mitomycin C is a must, probably with higher concentration and sufficient control of the inflammation with the means of PRP or anti-VEGF before planning surgery is required, and plan the surgery within a week or 10 days of anti-VEGF injection, so that till the effect persists, the surgery is over. Bevacizumab is not being used these days, rather ranibizumab is the choice. GDDs, yes, these are very good options, but whether primary GDD or not, that is a question. That is a debatable. Many surgeons will advise primary GDD in this case also, and nothing is wrong in that. That also is correct. The good thing about glaucoma is that more than one option can serve the same purpose nicely. But the best scenario would have been whether if the conjunctiva is cut, probably GDD, I would have gone directly into that. And also you can see if it is a neovascular glaucoma in particular, GDD also doesn't work wonders all the time. After 2 years, the success rate comes to 61.9% versus 81.8%. And after 5 years, the success rates come down to 20.6% versus 81.8%. So GDD is also nothing magic. It will work, or it is supposed to work, but what if it doesn't work? We need to keep our options open. We looked at the TVT study. Yes, there is higher failure rate in trap group compared to the tube group. But what the problem is there is they excluded neovascular glaucoma altogether from the study. So this study is not going to help us in deciding for particular this case. And trap versus AGV, also one article over here, you can see we found similar results after trap with MMC and AGV. So the literatures are not averse to doing trap, particularly when there is a question of multiple injections, and the other eye also probably some intervention would have been required at some point of time. So better thing in this case was that the patient has a seeing eye. That is a good thing, and that is a risk factor also, because we don't want to lose whatever vision is there in the patient's eye. And other good things are that PRP was done and anti-VEGF was given in both eyes, and no conjunctival scarring was there. And other good thing was that it was asymmetrical involvement. If both the eyes were involved symmetrically, suppose both the eye pressure was 44, then it would have been very difficult for us to decide which eye to treat and with what. So only in the right eye uncontrolled IOP we had to decide on. That way, we decided on a NMC augmented trabeculectomy with Jacobi emulsification. Patient had some amount of cortical cataract also, as you have seen before. Was planned in right eye. So the question comes, what was the algorithm? Why did I choose a trap? Because patient was having a seeing eye. Definitely, diet CBC was not the first choice. And patient had a untouched conjunctiva. Choice of GDD is always there in a failed trap, but the reverse is not that promising. Suppose if the GDD fails, you cannot come back to trap, and even if you do a trap, the result will not be that good. So we need to preserve our options and spend them wisely. And the other way also could have gone to a stage of uncontrolled intraocular pressure. The cost factor in addition to anti-VEGF, when you think of multiple anti-VEGF injections, you can understand the cost. It just soars up. And the review of literature also showed the promising results. So with this logics in our mind, we decided to go for a trap. And fortunately, the trap was done last year in August, and he is doing well in that eye. And according to our apprehension, we needed a trap in the other eye also, and it was done just in this February. And fortunately, till the lockdown, when it closed down, I was able to see the patient at a 1 month follow-up, and the patient was doing well. The other eye had a follow-up of 7.5 months by now, and that eye also is not on any anti-glaucoma medications. So in the neovascular glaucoma, that doesn't mean it is the end of the road. Why I brought this patient for presentation is, these are the systemic considerations we should always keep in mind, and a careful undilated slit lamp. I repeat, undilated slit lamp examination is the key to successful diagnosis of NVG, because not always we search for NVGs in all the cases and find such fine NVGs in very early stage. If we detect the NVGs at a very later stage, then we have already lost the game. So we have to detect them very early, and for that undilated slit lamp examination, particularly if you can see the fundus, many times you will be surprised to see that a CRVO is sitting behind, and through the small pupil also you can make out the blood and thunder appearance, and come back and search for the NVIs on the iris or NVAs with gonio and find them. Just the early detection will save a lot of patients in your practice. And we should remember the prospect of NVGs in all PDL and RVO cases. And visual potential is an important factor to plan treatment for patients with NVG. Prompt treatment of neovascularization in the form of PRP or anterior retinal cryopexy or anti-VEGF is a wonder, unless those adjuncts are available. Treating only neovascularization or glaucoma is futile. So we need to always address the root cause of neovascularization first, which most often lies in the posterior segment, not in the anterior segment, and wait for the optimal situation. But please don't delay the intervention once it is achieved. So the take-home message is, hit the iron when it's hot, and probably when you apply that thing to the eye, cut it while it is quiet. Thank you all. Thanks for the listening.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for sharing such an interesting case. I'm happy to share that we have more than 1,000 live viewers today for this webinar. And with your due permission, sir, we can conclude today's webinar. So thank you to all our speakers for managing in this critical hour and sharing time for this webinar. Thank you to all the participants for joining the webinar, and also thank you to Avesta team for organizing this platform for the webinar. Thank you all, sir.
Yes, and thanks to the lightning that happened, that saved me from all the questions, particularly Manish would have asked a lot of questions. I think the lightning saved me.
Thank you, Dr. Monali, and thank you to Avesta for such a lovely experience.
Yes, thanks for hosting a nice meeting.
And one message, in case there is,
Thank you, sir.
One message
particularly
I like
during
to
this
share.
trying times.
Thank you, sir.
One message
Yes,
I like to share to all the audience who are still there. Okay, I was thinking on behalf of all three of us, we all have been working for years. So I know it's a tough time, but this is the reason why we have been working for such a long time. I'm sure this time will also pass. For next few months, let us try to save ourselves. If we are fine, we can see patients later on also. Let us not be in hurry to see patients. We will get time again. So at this moment, let us try to save ourselves and our family and friends. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
I
you,
echo
sir.
that. Same to you.
Bye.